This Week in Startups is brought to you by Audible.com, a leading provider of spoken audio information and entertainment. Listen to audiobooks whenever and wherever you want. Visit audible.com/twist for your free audiobook.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of This Week in Startups. I'm your host, Jason Calacanis, and as you know, I love audiobooks, I love books. Why? I was a 71, three-year average kid from Brooklyn, Bay Ridge. My guest is actually from Brooklyn, but she's from Brooklyn when it was cool. I'm from the uncool section of Brooklyn, Bay Ridge, which still remains uncool to this day. I put my mark on Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. Still uncool and proud of it. But listen, I talk about it all the time. If you want to be smart, books are the way to do it, and Audible is the way to consume a large amount of content and to really broaden your horizons in a very short period of time. I go on a hike every week with my daughter. I drive down to the valley. It's like probably 5, 6, 7 hours a week. I can listen to a book, and Audible is the way to do that. So go to audible.com/twist, get one of our free books. And they are partnered with us on this series where every year I pick 10 books that I'm listening to. We try to get the author to come in, and we are very lucky today to have Virginia Heffernan, who many of you recognize that byline from the New York Times. She's a wonderful, wonderful writer. And this is your, I guess this is your first book, right? You were co-author of a book. You did a graphic novel.
Yep. It wasn't graphic, but it was comic. And it was co-written, and it was about 20 pages long. So,
right.
And I was the lesser co-writer, so I think I wrote 3 pages. We did it in an afternoon, and we couldn't get, had one joke, so it was easy to write over and over for 3 pages.
Right.
That was called The Underminer, and I still love that book. But this is the first biggie.
This is the first big one.
Yeah.
And you waited till you were, we're about the same age. You were born in 1969, I'm born in 1970. So we're both Gen Xers.
We're both Gen X. I've decided we are more entitled than millennials.
We are more entitled.
They are. I can't believe millennials are all with the enterprising do-it-yourself stuff, and I just always am like, "Where's someone getting me coffee?"
Right.
I keep waiting to have an assistant, and they shouldn't show up.
Well, they are very mission-driven, aren't they?
They are mission-driven, and they're always active for causes and stuff.
I think we live out of fear. Like Gen Xers live out this fear that the jobs are going to go away, and we just have to secure a good job and secure a future for ourselves.
And hold on to the lower rung of the middle class like a wolf.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you decided to write a book.
Yes.
And I get the sense that because you're a very good writer, by the way, and I think everybody knows that. I've been reading you for a long time in the New York Times.
Thank you.
And you're good with the prose. You take it seriously writing a book.
Yeah.
And you waited a long time to write a book. I'm sure you got, like many of us, these crazy offers to do this for dummies, that for dummies. In other words, books that probably will not stand the test of time.
Right.
But you chose to write this book. And it's very personal.
I would have sold out in a second, except that they kept saying, well, yeah, you can write a book, but it needs to have, those books that I just saw in the airport that all are called the one thing, the only thing you need to know.
The secret, yeah.
The secret, the one line. Yeah, but that are, or pop. The difference you can make in your business in 30 seconds or whatever.
Right.
And I kept not thinking of a difference like that. I would go down different roads and say, I don't think it's one thing. I don't think it's one thing. But if I could have faked it for 150 pages, I would have done it. But I just didn't have the skills.
So you chose this book.
Yep.
You wanted to write this book. It's very clear from the get in the book that you're passionate about the subject.
Yeah.
Why this book? Why did you choose this topic, and why now?
I got on the internet in 1979 when I called it the computer. We didn't have the word internet, but it was a networked computing system. I was 9 and 10, and it was always in my mind that it was one of the most profound experiences of my life, talking to strangers, talking to adults on all kinds of topics.
Where was this? Where did you run into that? At your dad's college or something?
Yeah, exactly. So he taught at Dartmouth College, and Dartmouth College in this colonial town, we were totally back to the land types, all of us with our chickens. We suddenly got religion around computing. In the 70s, we got the president of the college, John Kemeny, had written the computer language BASIC, and offered in exchange for land to put in a giant mainframe, one of those just monstrous, heaving, breathing, rattling mainframes in the middle of town. He said he would teach the school children BASIC. So we learned a little BASIC, and then 4 of us. So what's that?
Virginia
yes,
rocks.
exactly.
20, go to 10.
Go to 10,
Run,
exactly.
here we go.
Yeah, I saw crossed 0 for the first time, little line.
Perfect.
And the go-tos, and you got to say like, you're an idiot to your brother or whatever at the end of the program, and it was the height of humor.
So you got infected by this early
I got
on.
infected by that bug, and I, persuaded my parents to tie up our one phone line with a modem that connected to a giant, one of those you can picture from war games, those black deep space backgrounds with green letters on the front. I could never forget about this. So I went on to study entirely
1200
humanities.
baud, 300 baud, 2400 baud. Remember the speed?
This was
Hayes,
the speed is hard because it wasn't a personal computer. It was it was like these like a Chromebook.
Probably.
It was like a Chromebook. It didn't have anything in it. They called it a dumb terminal because it had nothing in its little head.
So that got in your head.
That got in my head, but I didn't think. I thought it was too nerdy. I thought it was too nerdy, and my friends started singing Desperado when I came around because they thought I was doing computer dating.
Right.
And so by the time I was 14, I swore it off. Went entirely into the humanities, did English, went all the way through to a very exhausting.
It's interesting. Your friends actually pushed you away from a career in computer science.
You know what?
The peer pressure.
These were the decisions. This is the decision I made. Go out drinking with your, friends in New Hampshire redneck town and drink a lot of Bartles and James coolers and smoke.
Right.
Or learn Fortran and Pascal, and turn into you or, whoever else I could have been had I learned to code, and I didn't.
Right.
But so in an effort to justify that excellent decision-making, I did a PhD in English and really thought I would teach English, but then the web hijacked me again.
Right.
In 1992, I saw it and I thought, this is just where I want to be, and this is my brain loves this. It was like incredible pleasure to see the birth of blogs, to see, to write for online magazines, see what commenters were like. I always wanted to know from New Hampshire, what were Americans like? What were people around the world like? What did they care about? And as soon as they flooded into the comments section on Slate, the first online magazine I wrote for, I just was like, this is for me. I know lots of people don't like YouTube comments, and for whatever reason, I love it. I can't get enough of like broken English, polyglot.
First.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, even
I should take a moment and just say, by the way, for those of you who want to just go buy the book right now, go to Amazon and buy Magic and Loss, The Internet as Art by Virginia Heffernan. Magic and Loss. Go ahead and type that in while you're listening to our conversation, or buy it at Audible. And you can also buy Audible books at Amazon. Now they sort of integrated the two platforms,
Absolutely.
and you can use your same credentials. And actually,
a long time, but it is so good. I mean, I love the Audible homepage.
Yeah.
But and by the way, they just reviewed the audiobook, which I love, the audiobook of Magic and Loss. I read the preface. Candace Thaxton, an incredibly good actress with a beautiful voice, reads the rest of it.
Is it an English accent?
No, it is not.
Okay.
It is not, but it's a beautiful American accent, very elegant.
I'm going to hire an English accent for my book, just to be like more regal.
Yeah, no, exactly. You get IQ points if you do it that way.
It's like 5 free IQ points.
Oh, absolutely. It's like the New Yorker typeface.
Yeah, exactly.
Anything you write in that.
Little serif.
You can write like, you're an idiot to your brother in that typeface. So Candace Thaxton reads it in this review. It said, Candace Thaxton's amazing, but Virginia Heffernan, who reads the preface, is too languid and tepid.
Huh.
Now, languid, I don't know if that seems like it could skew either way, but tepid, no one wants to be tepid. So I'm concentrating on not being tepid right now.
Yeah,
I'm going to be punchy and lively and bring the Amy Schumer.
Yeah. So when you first started writing online, I get the sense that this was magic to you. There was a magic period of the internet, which was for all of us, I think, and I went online the same time as you did in the late 70s, early 80s when I first got on computers.
Yeah, nice.
It was interesting for our generation, I think, because we had known a world without computers.
Yeah.
We knew the world without modems, and we saw the web and the modems and stuff like that emerge.
Yeah.
Does that give us an appreciation for, as a generation, we're kind of the only generation, I guess the boomers to a lesser extent, that grew up without it, but then our adulthood were defined by it. It is quite a swing.
It is a swing. I will say, I'm glad we were talking about our childhoods a little, and you just mentioned Bay Ridge, your wonderfully, exquisitely uncool neighborhood.
Yes.
That is like, it's like a stronghold of uncool even now. And I would say
We're holding the fort.
We're holding the fort, yes. So
no hipsters.
Cool. No hipsters. Like those lively people with their ukuleles are not allowed in Bay Ridge, and it's great.
No sideburns or suspenders.
I will say New Hampshire, also a nice place to find some really uncool spots. And, to go back to our childhood since we're talking about the 70s and 80s, I don't know that I knew an unwired world because my beloved late grandfather had been a real hillbilly and didn't go to college, skipped all that, and brought cable television to Appalachia in the 50s.
Wow!
And
in the 50s,
that
was amongst
before
the first.
It was in New York, exactly. And he was the hero of our family. So when I thought about Lyle W. Coffey, big part of, I think, the history of cable television, and he literally put in the poles in rocky Appalachia. Yeah. And I remember hearing about that. My mother said, people in New York, people in cool places have plenty to do. They have plenty of entertainment.
Right.
They can defy television and say, we're going to Broadway, we're going to the Met.
CBGBs. Yeah.
We do not have that here in McDowell County, West Virginia. And when we got television, it was like our lives, we came to life, It
was a really amazing box back then. For people who don't know, it looked like almost a typewriter and had push buttons, like a row of push buttons. You could
the cable box?
The cable box.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
You had to push down. It would make a clicking sound, and then the TV would clunk and change.
The pushing down on the buttons, including on the remote, which actually had a tube, a tube that connected to the TV. It wasn't wireless.
Right.
But so, watching my grandfather watch television and instantly thinking, anyone who says this is not good for people really must be living in a place of privilege, And I think this about the internet too, that, it's a person that can afford a giant space with a wine cellar and perfect books on the walls or whatever, who says, oh, there's something so tacky and terrible about being on the internet all the time. Or there's something so, I don't need that because I have my perfect 20 friends. But, if you're uncool, if you're you growing up, with in Bay Ridge, and you don't have access to these interesting people, the second you sign online, and all of a sudden, in my case, I remember people were talking about Reaganomics. They were talking about Dungeons and Dragons. They were things that, my little friends didn't talk about. And
I see you as like an elven cleric. I don't know.
Well, yes, I did. I like to see myself as a high priestess, is the truth. Yes,
okay.
exactly.
Cool. Yeah.
But, and my first...
I was a chaotic neutral assassin.
I can see that.
Always kind of a Boba Fett kind of figure in my life.
Very nice.
I'll pick a side when I decide which one's the more profitable one.
If we weren't just playing with dice and paper in those days, we probably would have run into each other.
Exactly. But it is amazing if you think about both the internet and Dungeons and Dragons at that time. There were ways to teleport yourself into a different world.
Absolutely.
And to leave your current reality.
Yes. And,
and Dungeons and Dragons must have been phenomenally popular in the burbs and out in the sticks.
Absolutely. And the sticks is where I was, and your literally in the woods. And your account of, how you broke out of, the life you were slated for in the police force and to the gentleman you've become today, is really that's a story of a lot of kids on the internet, which is I am almost homesick for crazy cosmopolitan or extraterrestrial life that I feel I want. I'm not entirely at home in my own skin and in social space or in family space. And, like kids with headphones in the 70s and rock on the turntable, I kind of want to be somewhere else. And what was amazing is we gave that person, that alter ego, names. And mine was Athena, because who doesn't want to be the wise warrior when they're a chubby 10-year-old, right? Yeah. And we're in
my
wisdom.
daughter's middle name, by the way.
Very nice. I love it.
My wife would not let me give Athena as my daughter's first name because she was like, Athena Kalakanis, our daughter looks Korean. And you're going to name her Athena Kalakanis. She's like an 8th Greek.
Yeah.
They're never going to believe this is her name.
Right. All of a sudden, she has to be a shipping magnate or nothing.
Exactly.
So I,
So you were Athena.
I was Athena, and hung out with some cis-progs who had names like, Apollo and whatever, Lysander. And, and we made this little world. And I couldn't believe, I thought I knew, it was 1981, and I was absolutely convinced, I would have sworn to it, that I knew every single person online, every single one of them. Yeah. I was just like, there's Bumblebee, there's Lysander, there's Apollo, and there's me, and, 12 other people with
message boards
names.
Were just starting dial-up bulletin boards. It was like a really interesting way to teleport yourself into other realms.
It was amazing. And, and then I knew, I was like you, I was a reader too. So it was really consistent with my desire to watch TV, listen to the radio, check out listening to music. But I liked radio where they actually, like this kind of thing, where they actually talked and you could hear different voices and accents and imagine different lives. And I liked games, electronic games. Did you get Simon and Merlin?
Oh yeah, of course, Simon. And I had the Atari 2600 when it was the Sears version.
Right.
So Sears was their first like OEM who built it for them.
Very, very cool.
And it was very interesting because I got to have the founder of Atari on the program a couple of times.
Amazing.
What's his name? Emmy Award-winning producer Jackie, tell me the founder of Atari's name. I can't believe
it's going to pop in here.
It's going to pop in a second.
Jackie's going to tell us.
But it was just amazing to have one. He also founded Chuck E. Cheese later in life.
Double winners. I mean,
but that was kind of surreal, is to have the guy who created your childhood like on the show.
Yeah, I've talked a little bit to Kameni's kids, who were the people that created the Dartmouth time-sharing system. I did get to learn that the computer network that I loved so much, Conference XYZ.
Nolan Bushnell.
Very nice. Well done. Oh, look at that. You asked the internet.
I asked the internet. Faster than Emmy Award-winning producer Jackie.
Amazing. I did meet some of them later, and one of the things they explained to me, so I was on at 9 and 10, like a girl today that you would probably be afraid of would be beset by predators. I was not beset by predators because it turned out I was in a gay cruising site. I was lost on me, but they were having conversations about other things. Later, they told me, we knew that you were like a straight little girl, and
they protected you.
They protected me. They wrote to me,
don't go in this
mixed
room.
cases and all this. There were not actually separate rooms, but it was a very tight camaraderie and a lot of fun.
Hey, let's read a section from the book, because you know what? I really, you're good with the prose, I have to say. Were you always good with, the sentence structure and writing stuff beautifully? Because you know what? I find your writing is, it's got texture to it, and you use, really nice sentence structure and words, but it's never pretentious. You must have worked hard to, make it pretty, but not too, make it elegant, but not, fluffy.
Yeah.
Have you worked a lot on your prose? And how did you become a good writer?
I did.
For people who are listening who are writers.
I wanted to be an academic, but I was really drawn to, a writer like Real Marcus or Camille Paglia, who, just write in this slightly aggro way that are always constantly surprising you.
Yeah.
And I had a professor.
I wonder what she's going to say next.
Yeah, exactly. I had a professor at in graduate school, and Helen Vendler, the brilliant poetry critic, and she said the most interesting thing about poetry is that the next word can always be anything, And so in that white space, you're in a moment of total vertigo. And it's going to land the next one. And your responsibility, if you're writing poetry, is to take advantage of each of those moments of freedom. So there is a time where if a sentence starts to write me, I try to get back into that absolute freedom. It's like this libertarian, giant universe of opportunity in between sentences, in between words. And I definitely don't get it right all the time, but thank you.
All right, so here is an excerpt from Magic and Loss, The Internet as Art by Virginia Heffernan. Go ahead.
Okay. The internet is the great masterpiece of human civilization. As an artifact, it challenges the pyramid, the aqueduct, the highway, the novel, the newspaper, the nation state, the Magna Carta, Easter Island, Stonehenge, agriculture, the feature film, the automobile, the television, the telegraph, the telephone, the Chanel suit, the airplane, the pencil, the book, the printing press, the radio, the realist painting, the abstract painting, the birth control pill, the washing machine, the skyscraper, the elevator, and cooked meat. As an idea, it rivals monotheism. Just as in Nietzsche's scheme, man created science, which in turn killed God, analog culture, books, clocks, film, industrial machines, the compasses and timers of scientific method, created digital culture. And now digital culture has superseded it. It was quick, the supersession, and now it's over. But where are we?
Fascinating. Very well done. So I could see you dropped us in on the Chanel bag. It's like you get everybody.
Yes.
You did a really good technique there, which is you've got us all nodding about the great moments in history. And then you insert your own moment, which is the Chanel bag.
Right, which was I was on the fence about that one.
I like it though. You know what it shows? It's like it's people you need to be paying attention. Like, yes, the car, the pen, cooked meat, agriculture. These things all were transformative in human history.
Yeah.
But in your mind, the internet surpasses all of those in a way, or is equal to those?
I would say it challenges, it rivals. And this is...
An argument can be made for each.
Yeah.
You could really have an actual argument about the car versus the internet, which is more transformative.
That's right. Partly I wanted to, especially with this passage, issue a provocation. You know, there are a lot of claims, serious claims made in books about technology that are, you know, only a company with this much user acquisition in the first year can be successful. You need to be profitable in 2 quarters. You need to be profitable in 2 years. And I didn't want to be there's a lot of opportunity for sophistry, for deceit, and for, you know, for obsolescence in a book like that.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make claims instead that engage the reader, because my love of Web 2.0 started with YouTube, started with a kind of video where you'd throw it down almost like a gauntlet, and back would come video responses, comments, and I loved that back and forth. So there's nothing better to me than when, you know, if I read this passage to a group, when someone, you know, raises their hand and says, cooked meat, now come on, or the Magna Carta, you're just really talking, you're on holy territory there. Yeah,
I mean, for me, that moment was agriculture, because if you just think about agriculture, that was the time. I mean, no agriculture, no free time, no ability. I mean, we're hunter-gatherers. We really didn't have the time to think about mythology, philosophy, politics. You know Magna Carta if you don't have the ability to have an upper class to sit around and think, right?
Yeah.
And
well, there's a little bit
big buildings.
I mean, things get a little trippy here, like they always do. I mean, with you, I'm sure you don't have a problem kind of going to mysticism, but there are a bunch of classicists, so studies of ancient and Roman Greece, who believe that there were self-digitizing communities before digital, so, you know, thousands of years before digitization. Well, that's a good question. But zeros and ones as a feature, obviously, of mathematics, but a way of organizing thought and a way of organizing abstraction, even around like early accounting and early philosophy. So, you know, even Platonic philosophy partakes of some of the logic of computer code, that computer code may have been with us well before electronic circuitry. And that is, so that way, in that way, you might say undergirding even agriculture were ways of thinking that are consistent, that were kind of the internet. There's a great French phrase, speaking of pretension, avant la lettre, meaning before the letter, before the fact of the internet, there's an internet. Whoa, I'm asking, you know.
For sure. And agriculture would be one of those things that, and also the rule of law, which is a rule system, which is very much like programming. I mean, if you kill somebody, and if you break their bone, you get to break their bone, and if they're a peasant and you break their bone, you give them 5 pieces of silver
as compensation.
Well, it's pretty interesting, like the rule sets that were made back then.
That's amazing. The evolution of currency is also something, and we can get into later, but that really mirrors the evolution of thought in, you know, from the material world to the increasing abstraction that we see in the form of Bitcoin and digital culture now. I, you know, am of the mind, and I think I'm just congenitally, you know, hopeful and even sort of the bigger or the more ecstatic version of that, optimistic, and believe that move toward increasing abstraction is always a move for the better and a more civilizing move.
Interesting.
But the reason for this list, the only thing I'll say at the end of this, all of these things it's been claimed, changed everything, including, by the way, Chanel, the Chanel suit, that's supposedly the hallmark of feminism and feminist freedom.
The Chanel suit is the hallmark of feminine freedom.
There is the argument that until you could travel in a Chanel suit and put up your bag and have a professional life, you weren't hamstrung by, you know, the upholstery or whatever of the sort of Yves Saint Laurent style. You couldn't be, you know, and this is a woman designing for women. You know, there is an argument to be made. And the point is there's an argument to be made that all of these changed everything. But we're wary of the changed everything argument. And so I'm cautious about using it in this book. On the other hand, come on. The internet is the air we breathe. This is entirely digital communication. We've got, you know, devices that contain more than the processing power of IBM in the 50s, many times over in this room, in our pockets. And, you know, there's no one who's off the internet almost at any given time. So we have a whole new civilization, ancient Rome, and even the you know, agricultural parts of the world at the genesis of agriculture, you know, nowhere near the numbers of this civilization, you know, which is pressing on the population of the world.
Yeah, it is becoming one culture.
It's becoming
one new emerging mythology, which is somehow...
I love the way you put that.
Yeah,
That's
somehow
amazing.
emerging from the internet is like this new mythology. When we get back on This Week in Startups, I want to talk to you about the mythology that this new generation sort of subscribes to, but also the search for truth, journalism, since you've been part of that journalism machine, and sort of the collapse of journalism and perhaps this new rebirth of something that is going to replace it when we get back on This Week in Startups. This is my favorite ad read on the planet. I love Audible. I've been an Audible customer for a decade, and I have hundreds of audiobooks. Yes, you heard that right. Literally hundreds of audiobooks. And, you know, I like to hike. You guys see pictures of me on my social media hiking. Sometimes I go hiking with my daughter. A lot of times I decide to walk from meeting to meeting in the city. I leave a little extra time, half an hour, 45 minutes, and I'm in the car, right? You're driving, going down to Palo Alto, coming back to the city, stopping everywhere in between, doing my business. And when I do that and I'm on the treadmill or the elliptical or the rowing machine, I like to get smarter. I like to be more worldly, and Audible is my way to do that. I have the Platinum offering, which is 2 books a month. You get dozens of books a year. And, you know, I've told you about some books I've been listening to, The Man Who Knew Infinity, The Hobbit, which I listened to with my daughter, Building Great Sentences, which you probably see in my work. I've been doing these really long, complicated compound sentences, and it's really helped me. I'm doing an Increase Your Vocabulary book right now from the Great Lessons. And Smarter, Faster, Better was my last pick. But I have one out of left field. And I'm going to tell you my technique on Audible. I go to audible.com and I look at what's best-selling, and I look in categories that maybe I'm weak in, or maybe I don't have as much exposure to. One of those is science. I need to be up on science, and sometimes I feel, you know, a little self-conscious. Maybe I don't know a lot of the classics. Maybe I don't know a lot of the things I should know. And I saw this book, Sapiens, and it had over 4,000 reviews, and it had 4.5 stars. And so I'm always looking for that when I'm looking through the bestsellers, when I'm looking through the highest ranked. I'm looking for 2 things. One, a lot of reviews and a high rating. And then I go read the reviews. And the reviews on Audible are amazing. There's so many super fans like me on there, and I don't take the time to review books, so I feel kind of guilty about that, but I will draft off of the people who do. And Sapiens is a 15-hour book, and I'm in chapter 6 of 21 right now, and I am riveted, like so riveted by this book, Sapiens, which is about humans and how there were multiple types of humans on the planet concurrently, and how we domesticated animals, and how we domesticated wheat, or how wheat domesticated us, and how we were hunter-gatherers. And it just explains the history and the evolution of humans, and it really relates back to today and people, you know, people's own happiness today and how we're evolving. This book is amazing. I literally was in my garage, I parked, and I stayed in my car for 15 minutes because I couldn't stop listening to it. And there's a great feature in Audible that I discovered about a year ago. It's the sleep timer. So when I'm going to go to bed, sometimes I have a hard time sleeping, right? We all have a hard time because we keep looking at our damn screens. We keep doing Twitter or Facebook and, you know, looking at things in our social feed. Here's a better strategy. You go to Audible. You get a really great book. You put on the sleep timer for 15 minutes. Then you fall asleep listening to a great book. And if you're still awake, you put it on another 15 minutes. If you fall asleep and you think you missed the last 5 minutes, when you wake up in the morning, you just rewind 5 minutes and you listen to the text over again or whatever. This is what I've been doing, and it works great for me. You own your books. It's not a streaming service. That would suck if you didn't own the books. You own the books, which is great because my wife and my daughter also listen to books on our account. And I also can listen to them now on the Alexa. So I have the Amazon Echo, and I'm like, Alexa, play this audiobook from Audible, and it does it. It's great. I love reading books, but you know, my eyes get tired, and a lot of times I have to have my eyes on the road. Self-driving cars are not here yet. So Audible is the perfect solution. I am a huge fan of Audible. Go to audible.com/twist and get your 30-day trial membership. And I got to tell you, like, I literally want to stop reading right now and stop the episode and go read Sapiens because I am loving this book, A Brief History of Humankind. And it's not brief, it's 15 hours. And where do you get like a value like that? For $10 to get 15 hours? It's unbelievable. It's less than $1 an hour. So go ahead and check out Sapiens. I love it. And I'm looking for some people to talk to it about. So if you're a friend of mine and you plan on having dinner or lunch with me, please read the book so we can talk about it. Go ahead and go to audible.com/twist, audible.com/twist, and download my book of the week for free by signing up at audible.com/twist. Go get Sapiens for free. It's on your Uncle Jason. Okay, let's get back to this amazing episode. I could talk about Audible all day, and I frequently do. Okay, let's get back to this amazing episode. Hey, everybody, welcome back to This Week in Startups. My guest today is Virginia Heffernan. She is the New York Times columnist. I think you worked for Yahoo for a minute, maybe still there?
Worked for Yahoo News, do not anymore.
Do not anymore. We'll get into that. And the new book, the only book, Magic and Loss, The Internet as Art, a fascinating read, a great listen. Go ahead and download it at audible.com/twist. It's going to be my book of the week next week. And you can follow Virginia on the Twitter at page88. You're good on Twitter. You're clever.
Love Twitter.
You get absolutely, like me, demolished. Anybody who's a writer. It's just the amount of weird people on the internet is just bizarre.
We were talking about Rome earlier. It is the Colosseum out there on a bad day on Twitter. You can emerge in a body cast, if not a body bag.
Yeah. And so how do you manage that psychologically as a writer? Because you put a lot of I'm certain you put a lot of emotion, care, and thought into your words. And when you put them out, the immediate reaction is kind of the dopamine rush. People read your words. They give you some feedback. It's kind of like that nice first hit of the heroin. Yeah. And you shoot it in your veins. And then if a bunch of people come back and they're like, you're a creationist, like you wrote this story, like, I prefer creationism. That's like a nice myth for me to be into.
Yes, exactly.
And people are like, oh, you're a Luddite, you're incredibly stupid, and they just attack you viciously. And as a woman,
they get right.
Congratulations, it's going to get a little rapey and insane.
It definitely gets rapey. I mean, look, I love.
It's nuts, isn't it?
I love that it is nuts. Well, it's nuts unless you've ever been emotional or around an emotional person. Like one problem,
an emotionally disturbed person. We called them EDPs on the
EDPs and
on the ambulance. EDP.
Traumatic.
Well, you can't say this is an emotionally disturbed person in front of them. So you say, coming in, 1098, 5 minutes, EDP.
Yeah. Well, I was a little bit surprised. Someone recently said the internet can't be art because Twitter is so angry. Where I thought, wait, I'm sorry. What about heightened emotional states is inconsistent with art, right?
Yeah, I know, punk rock.
Like if you
the whole genre is angry.
Yeah. So I was reading. Anyway, I've been reading a novel recently that's filled with tons of rage, and I was like,
which one?
It's Brideshead Revisited, actually, where you think of it as fancy, but actually there's a lot of just like seething rage. It's a bad Twitter day. Doesn't sound unlike. An Evelyn Waugh day, like a lot of British rage anyway. So a lot of novelists that we know and love, Ken Kesey and so forth, are like, all with the Twitter rage.
Did you ever feel silenced because the cacophony of haters, angry people gets so loud and so personal that I can't help but think that it is in some way shaping these maniacs, trolls, fake accounts, emotionally disturbed people, and just people who maybe are incredibly clever and use rage as a tool. Yeah. I can't help but think that they're shaping the narrative because writers, I had one friend who's a writer who took an advance on a book. Yeah. After floating the ideas for the book on their blog and on social media, they got so much vitriol that they decided, I'm not going to write this book because I just don't want to deal with this. I have another idea that would make my life more delightful. I sat the person down and I said, do you realize famous first name, even more famous last name, brilliant writer who inspires people to think differently. Yeah. That famous person's name is now deciding what to write based on anonymous trolls on Twitter. And he said, now that you put it that way, I feel really bad. I said, you should. Yeah. Turn off your Twitter account. Society's going to miss a great book.
Trolls of the world.
Do you feel it shapes your writing? Do you feel it shapes what you're willing to publish?
Well, here's the thing. I like knowing that I've got a fellow traveler in you, Jason, because you did not have trouble early on with the idea that you could be two people or even multiple people. Right. And that's what the signature move of joining the internet is. And if you're comfortable on the internet, you don't feel it's mandatory to be in social media. You don't feel like, oh, I've got to work up my Snapchat game because, I'm trying to sell skin lotion and tons of people do. And if you were on there for a long time, just wanting to get the texture of, different consciousnesses. I mean, white nationalism came on the first network I joined. There were merchant marines who typed in all caps and said things, about women or about their nativist ideology that is, we see surfacing in the Trump supporters. You see surfacing on Twitter all the time. That is part of what it is to be human. That is an id And if you don't think that people are violent and sexual and whatever at heart, then, you haven't seen any movies or read any novels.
Yeah, or just read the basic premise of Freud's theories.
That's right. So even as it trickles into, pop culture. So I made up Athena in the beginning. I made up a warrior to be my avatar. And she was a cartoon. That was my first one. I was 9. She was a cartoon. She was invulnerable. She looked like some of the Second Life people that they choose for themselves, hourglass with a lot of, armor. And I've always seen, even Page 88, my avatar on Twitter now, as someone who takes sniper fire for me, who gets arrows shot at her.
Yeah.
And who, if I'm having a bad day on Twitter, if Page 88's having a bad day on Twitter, let freaking Page 88 handle this for me.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be out
come up
here.
With that name, Page 88? What does it mean?
That is...
It's got to be a reference to something. I'm going to feel like I'm going to open up a book on read Page 88 and it's going to be like, you're all idiots.
It's not interesting. Page is my middle name spelled that way, and 88's a lucky number. But the reason that it's not my name is I joined Twitter, you probably did too, when it was stealth. So I used like a close to my eBay name because I thought the internet was anonymous.
Right.
And I had no thought that the New York Times would want us on Twitter promoting our stuff.
They didn't for a long time.
They didn't, exactly.
And they're going back to not wanting you on it, right? Didn't they just say like, hey, no opinions on Twitter, please?
Well, they're careful. Yeah, retweets are my own or not even any retweets like that. Yeah. But they definitely want you, flogging your stuff and the New York Times stuff and linking, back to NY Times. I mean, who doesn't?
So back to the original question. Do you feel your writing is shaped by the hate in some way, unconsciously, subconsciously? Do you feel if you didn't have, this contingent of haters or just bizarre EDPs?
Yep.
You would write differently or more openly or maybe explore avenues that you just feel like it's not worth going down this avenue, whether it's feminism or race or culture or poverty or income disparity. Like it feels like there's a whole series of topics that are zero-sum game to discuss now because the blowback is just greater than the reward.
Yeah. I made a list one time of for this little cartoon I did on Medium that about, when you suddenly have this great idea for a tweet in the shower, like Israel is bullshit. Right. And you're just like, look at that. I could tag the State Department and, I could get Jon Stewart on there. I've got all these characters left over and like that, intense desire to mix it up and troll. Yeah. This isn't me. This is a troll that I'm imagining in this cartoon. But yeah, there was a list of stuff like, do you want to write it about low carb diets? Like there's just certain things that set people's hair on fire. I don't know why, what causes autism, whatever. It's you're in it if you go that distance. I will say the hate on the internet has changed my writing for the better. So
explain.
I'll give one example. I wrote a piece a long time ago about typos as a hallmark of internet style. This is in the book a little bit. And what were typos and who makes them and what do you do about them when you're quoting, say, you're quoting a comment and it has a typo in it, what you think's a typo. Do you correct it for the New York Times or do you leave it? So this
put SIC. Sick,
or put sick, which is there's something a little snobby and sneering about that.
Oh, it's like, by the way, you're stupid.
Yeah.
And I'm putting this in here to point out that you're stupid.
Yeah.
And congratulations that you auto-corrected on your iPhone.
Exactly.
And it took out the apostrophe.
That's right. And you're pretending that you're just like, no judgment, sick,
no
sick,
judgment,
sick, sick,
you're just dumb.
And it happens to be the word sick, which, really nails it. So I didn't like doing that. And I didn't know quite what to, it was just exploring the history of, quoting dialect and stuff in the New York Times. So
people do fix the quotes and make them more clear.
People fix the quotes and make them more clear, but there's a lot of, confusion around that. And sometimes if you say haters gonna hate, like, is it better to change that to haters are going to hate? Or do you lose what's the main thing that's interesting about the quote? And
where did you end up?
Do you make it sound dumber to quote it the real way or dumber to change it, in that case? Anyway, so I'll tell you where I ended up, but I also gave an example of a common typo. And the common typo, and I know this is going to set off allergies for listeners and you, the common typo I quoted was TEH, right? It's like, this is how we sometimes accidentally write the. Well, TEH is a term of art for, the 4chan crowd and has become a meme far outside that, that indicates a certain kind of, people use it as internets to talk about, a kind of like master of the obviousness or a kind of something, but it signifies in 1,000 directions.
Right.
I got piled on for using te as my example. And it was just like, she knows nothing about the internet. She shouldn't write about the internet. The Times is so stupid about the internet. She didn't know anything. She can't code. She's a disaster. And there was and there were, whatever. There was misogyny. There was all that. Let's rape her.
Yeah. So 12-year-old boys, given anonymity.
Yeah.
Where do you think they're going?
Exactly. So I went but I was happy. I mean, as long as Page 88 and other proxies for me could take the hate and, the rape threats, I was able to assimilate, and I read all around the te tradition, and I knew I'm responsible to this idiom set too. I can't just say, oh, because they don't understand stuff I grew up with or stuff I've studied, that this is inadmissible. This is incredibly powerful data for me. Yeah. And if I could let myself learn it, and by the way, that became an education. I mean, I then was like, I need to go on 4chan. I need to sort of read how these people talk. And
kind of a disturbing thing to be on 4chan. It's literally like when I was 10 or 12 years old hanging out in McKinley Park in Bay Ridge, just whatever the worst things in the world were presented to you by the older kids. Like, here's some magazines with some really horrible stuff in it.
Yeah, that's
Here's some really bad views of the world. Let's discuss them.
Yes. And there was a lot of that. And it was, super accessible at every stage.
In a way.
Yeah. Desensitizing, that's right. But also, and this, I don't want to sound corny or something, but, they say the role of art and writing, too, is to comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable. Yeah. And if I wanted to comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable myself, I needed to be prepared to be disturbed because, on balance, I'm comfortable. And if I'm comfortable, I have this place in the Times or in a book to say te, or in one case, say something. I quoted a tweet that had something in it that was considered racist, honestly, to people who weighed in on it. So I was quoting a tweet by another person, but to have that, and it wasn't a explicitly racist tweet, but it was a very subtle thing that I wouldn't have guessed. And once people pushed back on it, I mean, I'll tell you what it was, even though it should be a source of embarrassment. It was a joke made by a person with a black avatar, like she looked African American in the picture. I don't know if she is. She said something about Kool-Aid, they drink Kool-Aid. Right. And it was a joke. And I wanted to quote the joke because it was a good joke. Right. But to mention Kool-Aid as a white writer is, in the context of writing about a black joke, even in a quote, was considered offensive and insulting.
I don't understand that.
So the first reaction is, oh, come on, I'm allowed to. But once I engaged and I did start DMing with some of the critics, I really understood that this was... I at least had to show awareness of that.
Got it. Is Kool-Aid derogatory because it's a poor person's drink? Is that what they're saying? Like it's like saying Colt 45 would be something that poor people would drink, or Night Train or something? It's possible, but I think this was race and not class inflected, as I understood it, the explanation. And I don't want to render the explanation, because I probably will get it wrong. But it was... Well, I mean, it is a thing about words right now.
But I was happy to be pushed back on. And, I get questions at talks about... Don't we think free speech is, a white guy asked me the other day, don't we think free speech is inhibited on the internet because people get offended so easily? Well, guess what? Offensive speech is always protected. Yeah. You can tell your jokes, but equally true, people can say, that's not funny, that's mansplaining, you suck, whatever. They used to laugh, or they used to make you feel like what you said, uncomfortably laugh, or zip it and not say anything back. I know I did forever. Yeah. But now, because free speech, because many, many other people are empowered with this publishing tool to tell you you're offensive, and they've told me too, I'm not, immune to this, then that feels to you like not free speech. So if you're like your friend or this famous name person, you've decided not to write a book because for fear of getting people to yell at you, I would say write that book. The Constitution protects you. Yeah. You can take some name calling on Twitter.
I do think that
writers,
we're starting to turn a corner on this safe spaces thing, because this really, really wacky, emotionally disturbed social justice contingent, and then there's the legitimate social justice contingent, and it's very hard to tell which ones are the mentally ill ones who are just going to attack everybody, and which ones have a really salient points to make, but this whole safe spaces thing, and people can't handle words or a dissenting opinion to the point at which they're like asking people on campus to censor other people or create safe spaces. What is your take on all this? These kids who are so weak that they literally want their professors to pick what words people say to them. Yeah. To me, this is like, it's so not punk rock. It's the opposite. Right. We wanted people to come on campus. We wanted people to tell us things that were uncomfortable and expand our horizons and be challenged. Yeah. And now there's a group of people who are like, please limit what I hear and limit what is said to me because I don't want to be triggered. I
like the trigger warnings and I like political correctness because I think they are putting pressure on the speech of the rest of us. So like the punk rock person who comes in and is, is just like, fuck the system or whatever. Yeah. They are saying... You forgot
your trigger warning on the word fuck, by the way. There's a bunch of people who are really disturbed.
T-dubs, trigger warning.
Trigger warning.
So like those people, they are saying back to professors that, oh, look, I'm going to hamstring everything you can say. There's a great Philip Roth novel about someone who said the word spook, meaning spy. And that was taken as a racist epithet. And suddenly his life goes into spirals. Yep. Well, what if the student in the 60s, the student would have been like, man, you're hegemony, you're the establishment, we hate you. That guy's life goes into spirals. Right. So the pushing back on authority, now done often by women who often claim they feel unsafe, but ends up making that professor figure feel unsafe. The guy with the mic now feels unsafe. The guy with the mic who's like, you can see this in Trump's tweets. Yeah. Trump is always getting his feelings hurt because someone doesn't like what he said and no one's grateful to him. I think the people who need the trigger warnings are the people who are like, oh, I can't say you've got a great figure to my colleague anymore without her getting all offended. Yeah. Well, listen, chill out, guy. Yeah, say it or don't say it. If you make her cry, that's your deal.
Yeah, it's an interesting moment in time we live in. It feels like the Trump movement... A large portion of it is a reaction. I mean, I'm interested in your take on it, but just on the free speech effort, it just seems like the 1/3 of people who feel like they don't know how to speak anymore because of political correctness, because of just trigger warnings or like that. These two groups of people, this trigger warning, safe spaces group combined, who are afraid of words, and this other group that wants to say racist stuff, are now driving the dialogue of the country.
Absolutely.
It's like the two worst groups of people.
That's ingenious. I mean, that is really brilliant. But what's interesting to me is the people trying to shut down the press are actually, well, certainly not the trigger warning safe space people. For example, a great civil libertarian, local, with a lot of money, famous name, who just shut down Gawker.
Peter Thiel. You can say his name.
All right, Peter Thiel.
Peter Thiel, closeted gay man, outed by a gay writer working for a gay publisher who both had a very specific agenda to out gay men. Yes. Let's just call it what it is.
That's right. Okay. Yeah. So he, but that is the kind of thing that, to me, a real civil liberties nut, someone who's really invested in that precious First Amendment, would not mobilized to shut that down. So Trump is trying to shut down the Washington Post, or at least shut them out of his campaign. Yeah. And Peter Thiel's trying to pull the plug on Gawker, which has actually done incredibly enterprising reporting since I first started reading it. So
wait a second, haven't they barbecued you with lies and unfair truths?
You know what? I can take it.
But they have. In all honesty, they've written lies about you. They've been very brutal to you. Yes or no?
Well, they've... Nick Denton is a friend. They've been good. They've been bad.
He's a friend of mine. But okay, but they have written stuff about you that you would consider untrue or less than honest.
And guess what? It hurt my feelings. And guess what? I got over it.
Got it.
And certainly if they told the truth about me, like that I'm gay if I were gay, I would have a hard time considering that libel, right? I mean, there's certain things I'm to the extent that I'm a public figure.
What about sex tapes? Or if you I'm assuming if you had a sex tape that you made in the privacy of your home and they stole it.
If it was
pretty. Depending on the lighting.
I want to hear about where the role of Photoshop in that. And then
exactly. But no, let's be honest here. You're being candid. You don't care about outing. You would not feel good about it, but you wouldn't want to sue them into oblivion. What if they stole or they bought a private sex tape or a stolen manuscript of a work you did that you never intended to be printed, and it destroyed your career? How would you feel then?
Career destruction is a terrible thing.
How about life destruction?
I don't know that they can destroy my life. Someone asked me.
If you had a sex tape and they published it, you don't think that would destroy your life? Honestly?
Do people still distribute sex tapes?
If it was stolen. I'm talking about a stolen sex tape.
I'm a nerdy writer. I think maybe someone would be like, "Oh, she's a lot more exciting than we thought."
I don't think you're being intellectually honest right now. I'll be honest, because it's one thing to have a thick skin about they don't like your writing or something like that. But if they stole your sex tape,
I think I'm not being. I'm being intellectually honest. I think it's possible I'm not being emotionally honest. But also, this is like one of those like, if your wife were raped, wouldn't you want the guy to get killed? I just don't know. So like, they steal a sex tape. First of all, it's hard for me to imagine because it may surprise you, but at 46, I don't make a lot of sex tapes. And I can't, I just can't imagine the novelty of having that distributed. But I will tell you, my career definitely suffered a setback. And I think I lost my job at Yahoo News because of something I wrote on Twitter. And wrote in Yahoo News and then ran out on Twitter. And let's just call it what it was and face it down. I like cried in my bed for weeks after that.
Right.
And
I'm not aware of that. What was that?
So this is the creationism thing that you referred to earlier.
Oh, the creationism thing.
Yeah.
Now, when you wrote this creationism thing, you were saying
Should we tell people what it was? Just get it out of the way.
I think we should. You just basically said you choose to be a creationist because you like that mythology best. So you like that story best.
That's right.
It's an intellectual argument, not a scientific one.
And sort of an aesthetic argument too.
Yeah.
No one likes that word aesthetic, but well. Let me. This is actually in response to your earlier awesome question about how has the hate on the internet affected my writing. There was hate before that piece that directed toward other writers that ended up affecting my decision to write that piece, which is interesting. The piece grew out of, it's like a live by the sword, die by the sword. It grew out of what I saw commenters saying, and it was kind of crushed. Right. Or my life was hurt by what commenters said. So I did not want to write about a trumped up media dispute like the mommy wars. I didn't want to write about my sexuality. I didn't want to write about, getting an egg donor or like little reproductive details of my life. I just, I'm a woman, but I'm not just a woman writer first,
It does peg you once you go down that road as like, oh, now she's a mommy blogger.
She writes on women's subjects. And I like, I have 2 kids, and just for whatever reason, I haven't been inspired to write about them or motherhood or not a lot about it. So I had been reading the comments. We had 70 million eyeballs on the Yahoo homepage. And when I bounced to the Yahoo homepage, it was like you tapped into this incredible world. And I had been writing about things that I would write about at the New York Times. And it just wasn't getting, there was a little bit of a factor in the, I would write about like something about Mitt Romney's digital campaign that I thought was fascinating. And the comments were a little like, you're not getting it for us. There were a lot of Christians in the comments. And there was a lot of feeling that like there were these giant, almost cosmological issues that concerned the readers. Yeah. And my obligation is to the readers, And so I wanted...
It's a different pool of readers than the New York Times.
That's right. And that's a weird thing about the internet. Yeah. That you can be the same you, but suddenly you're in the Yahoo News, you're talking about typefaces or, showing up in a British accent. Right. You're in a British accent on the New York Times, basically, mid-Atlantic, fancy American accent. And then all of a sudden you're in a different vernacular, a different design scheme, this chaotic thing with the purple. And you're, as I said before, beholden to a different idiom, a different style. So because of that, I wanted to write something relevant. And I'm interested in cosmology and philosophy too, to be honest. And I studied it as an undergraduate. So I wrote a piece about, I thought a lighthearted piece, about my unwillingness to accept an entirely materialistic view of the universe. So at the Big Bang, was there nothing there? What was there before the Big Bang? Was it a black hole? I just, whatever. I don't buy it.
It is most scientists can say, hey, the Big Bang did happen, but they cannot explain what happened before it.
That's right. Yeah. And the same with the advent of consciousness. So what happens when material suddenly gets, what we call consciousness? So maybe because I'm lazy, maybe because I can't do equations and I have no background in physics, but for whatever reason, I supply God in that space, a minimalist theism. Do I think God determines everything I do? No, I do go to church, but I don't, but this isn't like a centerpiece of my life. So I wrote this piece that I dissented from journalists, many journalists in this way, and was closer to someone like Obama, who talks about, politicians, it's practically mandatory to believe in God. journalist,
Yeah,
it's
you're not gonna be
practically
you're not gonna
forbidden.
be in charge. Yeah, if you're a journalist, you're supposed to be an atheist. If you're a presidential candidate, you're supposed to be pious and go to church every weekend.
That's right.
And be God-fearing.
That's right.
Or you can't be elected.
I'm so glad you said this because that is such a fascinating split, right? And like, no one's going to be like, oh, Obama, he's such an airy, Age of Aquarius,
He's
weird.
an atheist. Come on.
Well, he's certainly said things that were more strongly creationist than I ever said.
To get elected. I mean, the guy also was like, come on. He was going to say shut down Guantanamo. He was going to end the police state. And he was going to, like, legalizing marijuana was, like, not on the table. And then he's like, yeah, we're definitely going to legalize this.
If you can't hold politicians responsible for what they say, if they're promises or statements of faith, then, and just guess that everyone's an opportunist or,
Of course they are. They have to get elected.
Okay.
Hillary Clinton was against gay marriage, and now she's like, on the float at the gay parades.
Well, maybe her views evolved. I mean, I don't think she was not against gay marriage earlier, and I don't think she's not in favor of it now. You know what I mean?
She's in favor of whatever gets her elected. They're politicians.
All right. Okay.
Anyway, that's my
You're
feeling.
maybe a little more cynical than I am. But in any case, I was surprised because I put this out there, yes, as a provocation, but also as an effort to send a signal to a different kind of reader on Yahoo News so that I could actually engage with what they cared about instead of writing my very wonky insider pieces.
I don't understand what's controversial about this. Like, if you believe in God, it's not controversial. The majority of the country does. So why were you barbecued? I don't understand.
It's a mistake to say that what shows up on Twitter is vox populi, is what the people think, because Reddit, which, I call it the, a forum for ideas. And every time I say that, people are like, huh. But, Reddit.
It's a forum for ideas, for sure.
It's a forum for ideas, right? So
message boards.
Reddit led with, or I think it was the second story of the day, that a former New York Times writer had come out with this nutty, batty thing about being a creationist. I thought the word creationist was so funny. I thought it was like...
Did you use that word?
Yes.
Okay.
I thought it was from like Inherit the Wind. It was so old-fashioned. And it's like Jesus had a pet dinosaur thing and young Earth. And I just thought it was funny and charming. But anyway, it wasn't, or at least to the Reddit crowd. So Twitter started gearing up in response to the Reddit thing, and they blowfish. It looks like millions of people are after you with pitchforks.
Right.
But I've insulted Ron Paul before. I've had a crowd come after me before, and I sort of knew what to do. And in the old days, pre-internet, I got letters from people in the Navy saying that I had given a bad review to NCIS. So I knew what it was like to have readers disagree with you. I hadn't quite managed that scale. And it got so vitriolic that I did have to turn off the computer, as I say, let my online avatar take the sniper fire for me and go to the beach, which is what I did for a couple days. And
that's
I don't think
it's like such a mob over something that's not very controversial. I mean, Elon Musk thinks we're in a simulator.
Yes.
His majority case is...
I know.
I think we're in a simulator because if you just look at simulation technology...
Yeah.
And it's a discussion point. I don't know that. I mean, I know Elon very well. I think he's actually an atheist. Like, I think he probably doesn't think, but he doesn't probably know.
You probably hope that everyone thinks like you do at bottom. Like we made this mistake with Donald Trump in New York. Like we were like, he's a showman. He'll say anything. But at bottom, he's kind of like a cosmopolitan New Yorker. He's not. Maybe Elon Musk believes that. Maybe he doesn't. I used to think I wanted Ray Kurzweil to be saner than he is. And now he's, gets a lot of money to hack death and is pretty sure we're going to live forever.
Yeah. So he jumped the fence, left the reservation, as we
the
say.
people at Compaq,
So what happened? You think they fired you at Yahoo for
that? My contract wasn't renewed. A few weeks later, and the famous name head of Yahoo is not a fan of the First Amendment, and she believes that the media is an extension of marketing for Yahoo. She or he.
She's not very good at content.
But who is good at content? Content is hard.
No, I mean, the idea that Marissa was going to be this, like, all of a sudden, somebody who had no artistic ability and was like sweating the shades of blue by an algorithm to pick the Google logo and the links was going to magically understand content. She's terrible at content. She made mistake after mistake after mistake. I mean, not hiring you. I mean, that was a good move. But
that's nice. She came in and said she wanted to do content, but by content, she meant the weather app, which is beautiful.
Well done.
But it didn't have, it wasn't like the essays that we were used to writing at the Times. And that's okay. That is okay.
She executed terribly. I mean, I think if we'll look back at the history of it and it's like, wow, you're supposed to be a product person and a technologist. The technology didn't get any better.
Yeah.
The products got marginally better for 1 year, and then we never saw a new product release.
Right.
And as a leader, nobody wanted to work for you.
Yeah.
And then on a content basis, the content is terrible. And like you have these like couple of shining stars there.
Yep.
Like the NBA writer yourself, and they weren't curated particularly well. So all three ways to run the company, you know, hiring great people and keeping them motivated, making great content, making great products. She failed on all three.
I mean, I know journalism interests you. With journalism, you have to empower people to take risks. And
I like it. I mean, if you write a story like that and it gets everybody's reaction, the follow-up, three follow-up pieces are going to get more views.
The three follow-up pieces,
does she not know what she's doing?
The Times did a roundtable based on it afterward. It's
a great topic.
I was on the radio for everything. It was a great topic, and and we couldn't have got more attention. But the thing is, if you're interested in debugging like a programmer like Marissa, or you're interested in PR, where you really don't have to, like, there's slip-ups. There are no slip-ups in journalism unless you've plagiarized or make fact mistakes, and I didn't. There are, successes and not successes, and by any metric that I had ever worked for, inspiring what felt like a coast-to-coast conversation about cosmology is a winner. We weren't talking about
Number
sex.
2 on Reddit is the goal.
Right? We weren't talking about sex. And also on a topic that I can stand behind. Freaking Does God Exist? Like, how great. What would you love for people to talk about?
Virginia, where are your follow-up pieces to this? And can we get you a talk show to talk about it for like a 6-part series?
Like suddenly Yahoo owns religion on the networks? It's great. But so here's the thing. That
must have been such a juicy contract. God, what did they have to pay you to leave the New York Times to go to Yahoo?
It was a nice contract.
No, I mean, they poached David Pogue, who is like, and I don't mean to pick on David Pogue, but I mean, in terms of like tech journalists, like we kind of all consider him like, you go do a show to him about the iPhone. He's kind of laughable. And they give him millions of dollars to come there.
Well, he's a friend. I mean, translating for a general audience tech, which he's been doing for a long time, is not easy.
Yeah.
But
the Steve Jobs show tune stuff was just over the top.
Well, he was a musical conductor. You use what you got.
I want my iPhone.
You use what you got. You remember it.
I do remember. That's true. But on the creation thing.
Yeah.
Do you believe in the Big Bang Theory? Or are you just saying for thought, as a thought bomb, I prefer, since we can't prove anything in the world and we're never going to know in this lifetime, I just prefer this myth as my way to go about my day. Yeah. But I obviously believe in science and climate change and evolution. Do you believe in evolution?
Of course, except that I will say I have not tested. I've read The Origin of Species, but I have not looked under a microscope at any goldfinch or even and really studied genealogy. Right. So essentially, I have faith in evolution. I have faith that the people who've studied it, especially biologists, that life changes by spontaneous mutation over time. There have been some questions that I have that are basically just dumb questions, like wait, but why questions from the front row, where like, didn't we used to change over like millennia, but then it turns out we changed like really short term, that happened. And then epigenetics seem to complicate things. But geez, am I not an expert in any of this? I mean, I really am moronic. So like, if I know a little bit about Chaucer, I think if a physicist had a theory of Chaucer, it would be much, much smarter than my theories about evolution, right? But I will say, the kind of happy ending to the creationism thing, and this is in the book, is that I did get in there and read some physics. But again, when I say read physics, a lot of the people I was having conversation with on Twitter were either just Reddit fans or they were something called science writers. So they have a degree in science writing, but they are not...
They don't do primary science.
They don't do primary science.
So you need to talk to Lisa Randall.
Right. So Lisa's a friend. I finally read Lisa's work. She is a staunch atheist. We had dinner. We talked about it. And I read Frank Wilczek, who won the Nobel Prize for Physics, I think in 2004, for an incredibly interesting argument about the Big Bang. I recommend his work to anyone interested in this. And we ended up, just in a way that like beautifully, helpfully ended the book, having an exchange on Twitter that was one of the most powerful of my life, that really closed the book for me, literally and figuratively, on this question about God's existence and its relation to Twitter. So typically, and this also answers your question, I believe what works, right? So and I think other people do too. What works to shore up their class position? What works to win a point at the seminar table? What works to get them through the day? What works to make them happy? What works to make them cool? What works to get them well, right?
Yep.
And I mean, look at the beliefs of Steve Jobs and the people at Compaq, and like all these are weird set of beliefs, right?
Fruitarian?
And yes, exactly.
I mean, Steve was a fruitarian for a while.
Yes.
I didn't believe in deodorant.
Fruitarianism. There's also breatharians. They live on air. Okay. So
I think by default, we're all part of that cult.
Yeah. Right, exactly. Yes. Yeah. But just air, I'm not going to try it today. How about that? So we all have a weird set of beliefs, just a muddied set of beliefs. Why else would people read their horoscopes and every place has to have a horoscope? Sure. All right. So I was after things cooled off for me on Twitter, I was looking around, searching by my name or whatever, my handle. And I noticed that, I had just read Frank Wilczek, this physicist. And so I was looking at his Twitter feed, and it's really interesting. And what he said was, he had a tweet that said, they say it works even if you don't believe in it, right? And then there was a link. And the link was to Wintley Phipps, this incredible baritone and a sort of expert on slave music, on gospel music, at I think Carnegie Hall, or it might have been Lincoln Center, doing a performance of Amazing Grace. And he started by playing on the pentatonic scale. I knew nothing about this. He calls it the slave scale, only the black notes. So he started hitting just the black keys, the flats and the sharps, and playing the beginning of this song. And what he said was, he thought the melody was a slave melody, but then the lyrics were written by, the words were written by the captain of the slave ship. And what he imagined was this melody being hummed on the ship, and the much more exalted lyrics being written by this slave captain who was found himself redeemed and pushed back on his past life and fell to his knees and was repentant. This guy did a version of the song, I won't even try, that had the sighs and rattling of chains in his voice, Wintley Phipps. I recommend this to everyone. Yeah. It is very, very hard to watch this and not cry. Right. It is very, very hard to watch this and not believe in grace. Right. And this was a physicist with a Nobel Prize in physics. He was not a science writer. He was not a Reddit reader. Yeah. Who said, they say it works even if you don't believe in it. Something about that had worked for him. Right. And he had been overcome with something like faith or grace. Yeah. So
most of these scientists do get to that point in their life where if you talk to them, consciousness, our own consciousness, is something that we cannot explain. Right. And we are still struggling with consciousness, and we're very much struggling with what is outside of the universe and then what's inside of the universe. And actually, it's Lisa's life work is dark matter and the spaces in between that we know there's something there, but we are not able to perceive it. We can only perceive the impact it's having on the other things that are perceivable.
That's right. And
which is mind-blowing when you think about it.
Absolutely. And it's our minds can almost not grasp it. And that's actually something I say about the internet itself. When I was looking at that phosphor screen in that dark yonder beyond the green letters, I was trying very hard, and I think we all were in those days, trying to fathom what's out there, what is beyond, and now what's behind, I don't have my iPhone around, but what's behind that, very comforting, but also very cluttered, interface of Apple that's like, friendly, 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 don't look over here, but there's something out there. The tubes, the, nearly 6 billion people who have cell phone subscriptions, all these people, this kind of collective consciousness, what is that thing? And when Lisa looks into dark matter, she's able to hold the spot for a void or for dark matter. Yeah. For me, when I look in that space, I see an extraordinary mystery that just because my mind cannot hold the space for the void, I call God. Right.
Wow. I have a much easier theory.
Okay.
Which you're going to love, which is, I think science fiction, to me, is the ultimate... is one of the ultimate manifestations of our dealing with the issue of God.
Absolutely.
And Prometheus, people hate this film.
Yes.
I've watched it 3 or 4 times right now.
Oh, good. I need to.
And every time I watch Prometheus, it really starts to make you think about who is the creator and what was the creator's motivation. And then were the creators working for another creator? Yes. And why does that creator hate us? And in Prometheus...
and why does that creator hate us?
In Prometheus, it's like, you just think about our lives of suffering and not knowing.
Yes.
And in Prometheus, Weigard goes to meet the engineers, and the engineers are just working for somebody else, and that's what the next two sequels are gonna Ridley Scott's gonna reveal. But they're just machines, and we are their own biological experiments. The aliens are biological. It's like there is no reason. It's just a crazy, insane experiment.
Yes.
And we're trying with our consciousness to read into it and project into it.
Make a story, juxtapose a story on it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it may just be that either it's a simulation like Elon and Christopher Nolan and Jonah Nolan with Westworld, which is going to be an amazing new series on HBO. That's going to deal with this issue. I talked to him a bunch about. Like, we're just trying to figure out and project onto something that might just be some crazy simulation or randomness.
Yeah, that's right.
And our big, crazy brains evolved to try to answer this question.
That's
When you think about that, that's truly mind-blowing.
Yes, and Elon Musk everything about him is manlier and bigger than I am, so I'm sure his brain is able to grasp the simulation. But for me, what works is, a pretty contained description of this, what I call a minimalist theism. And
some god somewhere pushing a button to start this whole maniacal life that we live.
I don't know about the button, but the rest, yes.
He did something.
She
did something.
I see a touchscreen.
A touchscreen? Male or female?
You want it,
or gender neutral? What does your gut tell you?
I don't even know if sentient, by the way, so I certainly wouldn't give a gender.
But, let's read one more.
Oh, yeah.
Excerpt from Magic and Lost, The Internet is Art. Obviously, if you can tell from this hour-long conversation we're having, Virginia's just a brilliant thinker and a great writer. Go buy the book right now. If you're a member of our audience, it's your Geary to go buy the book and tweet it and tell everybody else to buy it on Amazon or Audible.
Thank you,
read us one more.
All right.
And by the way, the chapters are all aligned by media type.
Yeah.
Why did you go with text, video, music, images, design, etc.?
I went back to the Greeks and decided that the building blocks of civilization are certain kinds of culture and cultural artifacts. Now, they didn't have as much YouTube video in ancient Greece as you might have expected. I mean, it was weird. They just couldn't get their hands on it. But so video is what they called performance, dance, performance. And the rest of them, text is poetry, music is music, design is architecture, and images are images. Images are frescoes. Now they're Instagram. So that draws the line from frescoes to Instagram.
Hey, by the way, after you read this excerpt, I got to ask you a question because you did a lot of TV criticism.
I did a lot of TV criticism, yeah.
This is going to be my little teaser, so stick around after this. I want to know what you think of Game of Thrones finale, last 2 episodes. Did you watch them? Or you didn't?
I'm not a Game of Thrones person. I'm sorry, God. I'm to my minimalist theist God. I'm so sorry. I know. Please don't turn it off.
Know what your sleeper TV
I have done the VR of Game of Thrones, the climb the wall thing, VR experience. I'm sorry. You got to do it.
Yeah. But after this excerpt, I want you to tell me what's your sleeper TV recommendation to stream. Okay, that's a better one.
All right.
Okay, here we go.
This is about music in the music chapter. Music can offset death. That's what we're all saying, isn't it? As Jobs said of the iPod after September 11th, hopefully it will bring a little joy to people. Yet in the name of being fast, portable, cheap, and extensive, digital music forfeits depth. Just as a photograph of a painting, however dazzlingly ultra-high def, can't convey the density of paint under paint, of canvas under paint, neither does the MP3 with bits that paraphrase a piece of music, suggest the echo of the chirp of the bassist's sneakers on the wooden stage as he nervously kicks his foot, or the sound of the backup singer's lungs still metabolizing pot smoke. For that multi-dimensional soundscape, you need to hear music live. MP3 compression is predicated on the idea that one slice of data skimmed off the top can communicate a sound made in time and space by multiple bodies, collisions, textures, and movements. Like Zeuxis's realist paintings, none of which survives except in the legend of how they fooled birds, MP3 tricks the senses. It suggests volume with hints of sonic light and shadow, the same way the first Mac interface was able to use graphic shading to suggest a stack of documents in 2 dimensions. We try to quench our thirst for music on MP3, but end up pecking at painted grapes. The legend of the painter Zeuxis, however, does not end with the duped birds. Pliny the Elder recounts in Naturalis Historia that Zeuxis's painting of grapes was only one entry in a competition with Parrhasius, another painter in ancient Greece. Thrilled by the birds' reaction to the grapes, Zeuxis turned to Parrhasius and asked his rival to pull back the veil on his painting. Not so fast. The veil, it seemed, was part of the painting, was itself an illusion. Gallantly, Zeuxis conceded, I have deceived the birds, but Parrhasius has deceived Zeuxis. This lovely parable used to be cited in discussions only of volumetric illusions, but the supremely French psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan, by the way, often a punchline, the wonderfully trippy 1960s thinker in the Steve Jobs mode, saw something else in it. Birds may be drawn to a spectacle, but humans are drawn to what's hidden. We refuse, as Lacan puts it, to have our gaze or hearing entirely tamed, to perceive only what an artist or auteur or musician wants us to perceive. We want to look around corners, probe mere paraphrase, demand what's being withheld from us. Where are all the songs in this tin can iPhone? Where is the how, the groove, the drum skin, the fret, the human larynx? Something is being concealed in these tiny, inviolate phones. We long to gain, then, what has been conspicuously squeezed out of a lossy compression. That longing builds in my neurons, I swear, as I listen to music from iTunes. These days, mostly Nico Case and Vampire Weekend. What am I missing? What am I missing? The possibility that others feel the same seems to find evidence in the entirely unpredicted renaissance in live music that has so far defined this century in music every bit or as much or more than the iPod. In live stage shows are errors, false notes, muffling pauses, heaving breath, hollow feedback, rampant distortion, and all the madness of uncompressed social space. Yet to everyone's surprise, this past decade has become a bonanza for touring. By 2015, touring bands were generating some $20 billion for live shows, more than they ever had in history. And that brings us to one of the biggest advantages of live gigs, scarcity, wrote Paul Resnikoff in Digital Music News. In the end, a concert can't be instantly copied or duplicated, and neither can the social in-person aspects that come with it. Epiphany.
Wow. Very well said. I love the painting story. I had never heard that.
Amazing, right?
Yeah.
It might be a myth, but it's beautiful, right?
Yeah, incredibly well done. And it is interesting when you think about music. We have access to everything. Everything is, in order to have access to everything, everything's been sampled and digitized and reduced and made less.
Yeah,
and
made less
full. And
we're supposed to feed ourselves on it, though.
Yeah.
And there's something else. There's a reason we came to talk about, startups and digital culture. We ended up talking about God. There's a thirst, even, you with your
on This Week in Startups.
Good, cynical, on This Week in Startups, God, right?
God, we got to God. And music, and you just think when we were growing up, we were like this last generation that music wasn't a singular activity. Like you would have your Walkman, you would put it on, and it was the only thing you could do on the device was hit play or rewind or flip it.
That's such a smart point.
And then when the MP3s came out, it was the same. The iPod gave you access to more. You could bring 10 albums with you instead of 2.
Yeah.
An extra cassette in your pocket or something. But now it's kind of like this backdrop. It's in the background. It's Pandora. Somebody else is choosing for you. And you're working, you're doing email, you're watching videos while listening to music.
Yeah.
It's not like the singular.
And if it's on your iPhone, you're doing no end of different diverse activities.
Yeah.
And some of them cut into the music, So like you can call up, obviously you call up YouTube, but you call up something with an audio feature and suddenly that's your music. And that's...
Well, you realize you're multitasking so much when you're like, oh, I just turned on my camera, the music stopped. Or I've run into a video on Gawker or something, or run into a video on BuzzFeed and the music has stopped. Oh, I'm not really listening to the music.
But those are, I know I'm an optimist, but those are blessings. They're calls to consciousness around this incredible phenomenon that is the internet, and in that way, a good thing.
Listen, we could talk for hours, and in fact, we did. We're now in the second hour of the program. And you're going to get a lot more if you just go get the book, Magic and Loss, The Internet as Art by Virginia Heffernan. And that's great. I didn't know you knew Lisa Randall. She's one of my good friends.
Yes. Oh, nice.
Very dear friend.
You're probably closer to her than I am, but I do really like her. We had a great dinner once.
She is brilliant and fun and funny. And she's really also in the way that, you're, I guess, started as a pop culture critic.
Yeah.
Tech critic, and then delved into God.
Yeah,
she's a scientist who delves into pop culture and into she's so worldly and she thinks about stuff. So when we hang out, we'll go see movies together or talk about it. So we went to see Jurassic Park together.
Oh, that's
and then
great.
of course, you go to see Jurassic Park with Lisa Randall. it's going to be a 3-hour dinner afterwards, and then coffee and tea until 1 a.m. talking about.
She's not just saying like, "Whoa, that was cool." She's telling you about like the dinosaurs and what that meteor did.
What is your sleeper? Tell me your sleeper series, because how much of your work has been doing criticism of pop culture and TV?
Well, TV criticism, I did that for 7 years, and life was just never not watching television,
That's got to be rough, man. God, just sitting on a couch and watching TV.
Extremely challenging and wearing. I mean, I still have a lot of sciatica, and I blew out my quads. I never
blew out your quads watching TV.
I never have athletic injuries. I still dream of having one day. I blew out my knee, man, like athletes have.
Yeah.
I have, I don't have
my Game of Thrones program, which is, I wanted to get into Game of Thrones, but I was like 25 pounds overweight. So I was like, I'll watch Game of Thrones, but I can only watch it on the treadmill.
Brilliant.
So I started watching back-to-back episodes on the treadmill for 2 hours. It was great.
That's where I listen to podcasts, and it's good. So just
give me your sleepers. Things that people would not consider or have not seen already in all likelihood.
Yes. So I am more than a big fan. It's so close to my heart of a fairly new show on Netflix called Bloodline. In its second season, and it has extraordinary performances. It is not that this is the chief feature of it, but it's an anti-digital show in the sense that it's not sci-fi at all. It's grounded in these performances that are very, let's see, like beautiful and classical in certain ways. And it's a mystery. And the people are very infrequently using computers or phones. I mean, if they can find a way to meet in person to talk about something that the rest of us would have texted over, they do, because the show is obsessed with faces and interpersonal contact. It's kind of like, anti-sci-fi. Beautiful, haunting show. Slow in the way of The Sopranos. Lots of air to supply, theories about what might be happening. It's such a good show.
I like a little bit of space in the shows, because the shows are so dense now.
Yes.
Like after Game of Thrones, I literally go on YouTube and I try to find a recap.
Yes.
So I can just be like, I know there's happened? Like, what the heck did I just watch? It's 3 or 4 people I don't know. But I can tell you're probably onto something, because when I told you, like, hey, give me something that maybe the critics or whatever, like people are not going to know, I always go to Metacritic.
Oh, yeah.
And Metacritic gives it a 75 from the critics, but the user score is 8.3 with 174 ratings. So a lot of people are passionate about it.
Yes.
And when it's a solid score from reviewers, but a higher score from users, to me, that's like this little sleeper category.
Yes.
So that's how I pick shows now. I just go to Metacritic and I look for these deltas and the little changes between what they score with the critic score and what the user score.
This, folks, is reading data. That is a beautiful, and that's how I will pick shows too. I mean, a hand cell is also great.
Which one?
And like someone just passing it off to you. And Bloodline is extraordinary. I'm slow binge on the 4th season of Orange is the New Black. I also really like performances. It's a very antic show.
Yeah.
And with a diverse cast, which I like because a
lot of characters.
So much texture and so many different characters. It has that anthill quality of like, we all live in this place on top of each other and our lives braid together. And also something I've never been able to do as an essayist, plotting. And the plot is just, I don't know how people make plots happen, honestly.
Yeah. It's kind of like become almost like an algorithm plots now, which is, what do people expect in a plot?
Yeah.
Let's tweak the algorithm to create unexpected moments. So if you just think about, this is my theory, which is, okay, what is the normal heuristic of plots, or what is in our common mythology of plots and how the structure should work?
Yeah.
And let's just tweak it a little bit.
Yep.
Let's break it a little bit to then create a refreshing experience that's worth talking about.
Yeah, that's right.
And so like killing off characters mid-season, not after 3 years of buildup, or you think that this is the main character, but in fact, this is not the main character. We're introducing the main character in the last episode.
Yes.
And next season, it's going to be 2 different main characters.
Bloodline has, you're onto something, because Bloodline has some of those things that you cannot, The
Sopranos
drops out. The Sopranos
had an interesting approach to that.
Knew about that. Yeah, kill off characters as you go. And you never know, like a really central character could die.
Did you watch The Americans?
I don't watch The Americans, and it's shot in my neighborhood, and I have to start. Okay,
and they also live there. They're a couple, Kerry Russell and the other guy, Matthew Reyes.
They live, they live in Brooklyn.
They live in Brooklyn.
Carrie Russell.
So good. And look at 78 Metascore and user score 8.4 with 412 ratings.
So
again,
delta,
my theory, the delta is
Why did I
up.
ever write television criticism? All you need is the delta.
Just you get the delta and you're going to...
You should make a separate site very quickly, very easy of the delta.
Just the delta. Just what people... You see it actually, you know what? Science fiction and horror are the two genres that it's very hard for, I think, critics... to be fans of, because they're low, they're not high, right?
Right.
They it's like hard to write something where you're like, I really appreciate this horror film. Yeah. So when you are looking at films, documentaries always score in the 80s or 90s on Metacritic or on Tomatoes. Right. It feels good. To be like, this is an important topic for society. Yep. So they just all skew high.
You know, the other thing is all these bingeable shows, documentaries are self-contained, but all these bingeable shows it's sometimes an 80-hour movie. And so, in some cases, video game critics are better equipped because you often need to play a game for 60, 70 hours in order to get it.
Wow.
And
that's a commitment.
We were often reviewing, and I still think we did a good job at the Times. We do a good job at the Times. James Panawozik is terrific, but we review on pilots and we review on premieres. And
2 shows. They give you 2 or 4 shows.
That's right. And you try to get deep into it, but a lot of your horror and sci-fi, you have to get that long line. You have to get that long line to understand, to get the payoff. Yeah. But I think people are getting that more and more. And there's and something like Bloodline pays off so well.
Who's your favorite director? Which favorite movie's favorite director?
Oh, that's a great question. So,
you have a genre that you're particularly fond of? Like if we were going to go to the movies and I was like, hey, Lisa, what do you want to see? And then I was like, hey, Virginia, what do you want to see?
What do I want to see?
Where would we wind up? What would we be lobbying for? Because this is going to happen, by the way. The 3 of us are going to go hit the movies.
This is going to be one of those... this is going to be one of those times where we need to call. You're going to have to ask the internet for the last name here. It's the director of Contact, of Castaway. I think it's Robert. And most recently of Flight, which I thought was an amazing movie.
I love Flight. Nicholas Roeg. No. Castaway. Let's see the director. Directed by Nicholas Roeg?
No, it's Cast Space Away.
Oh, I'm on this other Castaway that has
Yeah. I was like, let's not leave that with the viewers. But he's an extremely pensive director. And
Robert Zemeckis.
Of course. Sorry, I'm just...
Wilson!
Yes, exactly. Oh my God. Falling in love with a volleyball. Who makes that up?
I love Flight. Flight to me...
Flight was so...
It's hard for people to love that film because it's about a degenerate.
Yeah. And that is like of degeneracy, it's hard to imagine better scene than an airplane pilot for anyone who's seen it.
Who hasn't
seen it, who is
on everything.
Been doing blow all night with girls, and there's lots of vodka that he's finished off, and he is flying a plane.
It's so great. I know people like that.
And there's surprises and surprises who live like that on the Coke and Bitches sort of
I just
diet.
know people who the amount of substances they do
unbelievable
correlates with their productivity in society to a level that I would never want to admit because it would drive people to get involved in substances that they shouldn't be.
Well, you and I are sober and we don't, that's not our thing. But if it's working for you and keeps working for you, it does not keep working for Denzel Washington. But if it works for you and keeps working for you, it's hard to imagine.
Work for the passengers. Spoiler alert.
Well, yeah, that's right. Except, anyway, there's a lot to say about Flight. Alerts. But anyway, Robert Zemeckis just is a director I love, and I see everything he does. Contact, and it's worth
Back to the Future, Forrest Gump,
yes,
Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Yeah, lots of them.
That's right, and they're very suggestive. I like movies that reproduce that feeling of that black space that I had on that first computer. Just like, whoa,
it does take you to another world. His films.
Yeah. Forrest Gump is not my favorite, but I love the others. Contact and Castaway. I don't know why people didn't love it as much as I did when it came out. Tom Hanks in a solo performance with falling in love with a volleyball. Come on.
I think my favorite director right now, or in my top 2 directors right now, Ridley Scott.
Yeah.
Who of course did Aliens, but. He also did Gladiator.
Yes.
And he did Black Hawk Down. He's like in G.I. Jane. He did a lot of incredible
big stuff. Yeah, you and I do.
But I also love John Frankenheimer. For those of you who don't know, no longer with us, but he did the thrillers of the 60s which are very psychological.
Oh, yeah.
That was like a great period of time. So Birdman of Alcatraz, The Train, which is a great Nazi film, 7 Days in May, which is extraordinary political thriller, Seconds, Ronin, Manchurian Candidate,
Ronin and Manchurian
French
Candidate.
Connection, French Connection 2, Birdman of Alcatraz, just so many great thrillers. He's a thriller director. And just
very
wow.
good to have that recommendation.
Put that in your thing. Okay, listen, I could go all day. Virginia Heffernan is the author of Magic and Lost, The Internet as Art. Are you going to be a journalist again, or what's your story? Are you going to go work for the New York Times again? Are you going to go work for...
There's some academic possibilities, and then there's always journalism.
You have a PhD.
I have a PhD. Yeah.
From Harvard.
And you know how much that's just a huge help in our current economy. I mean, no one... Y Combinator is just on me all the time to bring that PhD over and get some money. They love it. A PhD in English with a lot of understanding of Milton.
Yeah, you can teach.
I can teach, and I love teaching. So I will teach. I will keep writing books, and I will keep writing journalism. It's just a gig I can't get enough of.
You'd go back to the New York Times or one of those places?
We'll see.
You thinking about it?
Yeah.
What is journalism? It's one question I was asking before we never got to. I'll end on it, but. What do you think, given this creative destruction that's occurred with like link baiting, social media, and just trying to give everybody the dopamine rush of like a headline, which when we talked about the painting with the fake cover, we've learned through link baiting that exact same effect is
absolutely
if we tell people a lie or we deceive them, it results in more clicks.
Right.
Therefore, all of journalism is moving towards deception in the headline.
Yeah, that's right.
And even the New York Times is like on their writers to social media, or share stuff and do, let's call it gimmicky stuff that plays on the fascination and change gene in our DNA, in our brains. What do you think the future of journalism now is? We have these like crash and burn Gawker, BuzzFeed-ification, and then the New York Times, I guess, is maybe turning a corner, but maybe not.
Yeah,
investigative journalism seems to be over. I mean, it's
a lot of things begin as Barnamism, begin as that low-level thing. I was reading about early animation, and the Muybridge era, Edward Muybridge, who and others who created. Those kind of loops of things. Yeah, essentially flip books that would show like how a horse moved or a naked lady or whatever.
Yeah,
those were
you would look at them through a almost like a VR headset.
Some of them
turn
were
the crank,
peep
right?
shows. Shows where you like looked in and just saw this thing going around, and they're like light porn or they're whatever they are.
Dancing lady or horse.
Yeah, and you pay a penny and you get to watch it, right?
Sure.
That is archived as the beginning of film. Right. And making images move. So, you have BuzzFeed, which starts out with clickbait and quizzes and so on, which, by the way, were a lot of fun for me, but I probably would have liked that penny machine too. And now is evolving into something more serious. The Times did it too. The New Yorker started as like a hot sheet for like, jet set types of the 20s and ended up in the 60s writing real journalism.
Where you finish.
Where you start isn't where you finish. And sometimes people get religion and, they make some money and then they suddenly are like, wait, what am I doing? I don't want to do another BuzzFeed quiz. I want to publish something real. What's interesting to me is Paul Graham at Y Combinator. By the way, this is a full-on solicitation of a job from YC, so let's just admit it.
Yeah.
But he identifies, I just saw his bio, not as an investor, not as a programmer, but really intensely as an essayist.
Right.
And, people at VCs, they start in VCs, they make money, they become angels like you, and then they're interested in making content.
Right.
They're interested, they've been writing their newsletter, and all of a sudden they say, making these newsletters is really where my heart is, Making a really good essay is really where my heart is, and I love the essay, so I am really happy to hear all these big brains moving in that direction.
The essay is coming back. It is really interesting, like, you point out something incredibly prescient, which is, when people get great wealth or they transcend the need for material items, right, which like a person like Paul has done, then it's like, well, what's left?
Yeah.
I'm not going to wake up and worry about the roof over my head or my kid's private school.
That's right.
And what hamburger I'm going to eat today. So then it's like, well, what do I want my stamp to be? What do I want my legacy to be? And what do I want to talk about today? What do I want my interactions to be? And essays are just this wonderful,
amazing,
underappreciated. I think that's why podcasts are sort of having this incredible resurgence. Is we all desire some meaningful conversation to understand the world. You should have a podcast. You don't have a podcast?
Maybe I'll just come and sub for you sometimes.
You should have a podcast.
Robin, whatever, to your Howard Stern.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, essays is just, it's a beautiful length, that kind of prose. And essay means try, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of test and learn to an essay. You're not, like the way that I said, the internet's a great masterpiece of civilization. That is a try. That is a provocation. That's just like, what do you think? You know? And
floating an idea.
And essays don't, and a lot of people who've been good with investments know what it's like to try, fail, start again. And that essay is that great form. It doesn't say, you know, to go back to the very beginning of our conversation, pop, here's the one thing you know to like make it in this world.
Here's a yellow cover that will make you successful.
Right. It says, what if we stopped having meetings? Or, you know, what if people worked in, you know, bigger teams? Or what if, you know, what if God existed? Or what if we're all a procession in the minds of some simulator? You know, those are these what if questions that are really, and having more minds like yours on questions like that is just hugely makes me happy. It's not just MFA students anymore.
Yeah,
you know?
Or Harvard PhDs. Hey, listen, what a great conversation. We're 90 minutes in, and we'll be right back with the second half of Jason and Virginia talk about life.
We're going 80 hours like The Sopranos, so, you know.
It is,
get a meal.
You know what? I think this is going to be like one of those episodes that we may have to break into two parts. It's that good. Hey, thanks to my friends at Audible for relentlessly supporting this podcast. Independent media is hard. We have a whole team here who work on the podcast. We couldn't do it without your support, and so we really appreciate it to my friends at Audible. And thank you to Emmy Award-winning producer Jackie, who now, just so people know, she picks 3 out of 4 guests for the show. I have nothing to do that. I show up, and I try to be the pretty face that asks very basic questions and then shuts up and listens. But she is my rock. Thank you, Jackie, for being such an amazing producer. In 2 years, we've been working together for 2 years. What a great collaboration. You're the best producer I've ever had. So thanks, Jackie, for making the show level up over the years. And listen, you're standing on the shoulder of some other great producers, Tyler, Gina, and other folks who have done a great job. So big kudos to producer Jackie. And go ahead, buy the book, Magic and Loss, The Internet as Art. And we'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.